What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cybersecurity Weekly Review, where we take a look back at all the events of last week in the security news arena. Many of these stories were covered in my dailies. I do still suggest that you watch this episode, not because I'm going to get 1,000 views or anything, but the simple fact is the more we read or hear about these events, the more we internalize them. This could be the third or fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh time you've heard about some of these important events, and that helps them stick in your mind, as well as gives your mind a new chance at processing the events and the possible implications in your environment. So grab some popcorn, sit back, and pay attention, man. This is for you, not for me. Alright, let's jump right in.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
A MITRE Corporation recently updated its list of the top 25 most dangerous software bugs, and it's a little surprise that a number of them have been on that list for years. The common weakness enumeration list represents vulnerabilities that have been widely known for years, yet are still being coded into software and being bypassed by testing. Both developers and testers presumably know better by now, but still keep making the same mistakes in building applications. How do these mistakes come about? There are a variety of reasons. In many cases, developers simply don't have security at the tops of their minds as they are coding the application. Their primary goal is to get the business logic right. Does it work? In cases where a particular algorithm doesn't seem to work right, developers have been known to turn off security restrictions until it behaved as expected. Developers lose face when their application has a logic bug, meaning it doesn't work, but not when there's a potential security vulnerability, because these are largely hidden until they're exploited. Testers have a more direct responsibility for ensuring applications are secure, but usually have limited tools and expertise for doing so. They are almost always testing code in isolation, often with no database or APIs or network, without a way to look into memory or create illegal commands and then interpret the results in terms of an attack. They're limited in their ability to identify security vulnerabilities. There is also still the overriding perception within the technical groups that security is the responsibility of the IT production group, not necessarily of the developers. After all, IT has significant tooling to define and manage an application and network perimeters, such as firewalls and anti-malware, and IP blocking lists, and all this, that, and the other. These are designed to protect the entire infrastructure. The focus on security in production often means that there is less of a focus in development and testing. It's all part of a culture where security vulnerabilities are largely hidden from view because they typically don't affect the function of the application, until it is, an attack succeeds and systems or data are lost. While it would be most effective to focus attention on security during the entire application cycle or life cycle, it is still critical to be vigilant in production. So it doesn't matter what development does, production IT still needs to be vigilant and have the highest standards. Looking at the specifics from the major differences between the 2020 and 2021 CVE Top 25 list is the continued transition to more specific weaknesses as opposed to abstract class-level weaknesses. A preliminary estimate suggests that the percentage of base-level CVEs has increased from roughly 60% to around 71% of all top 25 entries, and the percentage of class-level CVEs has decreased from 30% to around 20% of entries. Other weakness levels, category, compound, and variant, remain relatively unchanged. With the relative decline of class-level weaknesses, more specific CVEs have moved up to take the place of these high-level classes, such as CVE-78, improper neutralization of special elements used in an operating system command, CVE-22, improper limitation of a path name to a restricted directory or path traversal, CVE-434, unrestricted upload of file and dangerous type, CVE-306, missing authentication for critical function, CVE-502, deserialization of untrusted data, CVE-862, missing authorization, and CVE-276, incorrect default permissions. The biggest movement up the list is CVE-276 or R, CVE-276 incorrect default permissions from number 41 to number 19, CVE-306 missing authentication for critical function from number 24 to number 11, CVE-502 deserialization of untrusted data from number 21 to number 13, CVE-862 missing authorization from 25 to 18, CVE-77 improper neutralization of specific elements used in a command from number 31 to number 25. Most of these weaknesses represent some of the most difficult areas to analyze on a system. A theory about this movement is that the community has improved its education, its tooling, and analysis capabilities related to some of the more implementation-specific weaknesses identified in previous editions of the CVE Top 25, and have reduced their occurrence. This would lower their ranking and in turn raise the ranking of these more difficult weaknesses. New entries of the top 25 are CVE-276, incorrect default permissions, number 41 to number 19, CVE-918, server-side request forgery from number 27 to number 24, CVE-77, improper neutralization of special elements using a command, which is command injection, from number 31 to number 25. Now, I highly recommend reviewing or re-reviewing the already reviewed list. You can check out my episode on it. The link is above, also pinned in the comments below. Or you can visit the MITRE website to read it there. We move on to phishing. Threat actors impersonated the U.S. Department of Transportation in a 2-day phishing campaign that used a combination of tactics, including creating new domains that mimic federal sites so as to appear to be legitimate, to evade security detections, of course. Between August 16th to 18th, researchers at email security provider Inky detected 41 phishing emails dangling the lure of bidding for projects benefiting from a $1 trillion infrastructure package recently passed by Congress, according to a report written by Inky's Roger Kay, Vice President of Security Strategy, that was published on last week. The campaign, which targeted companies in industries such as engineering, energy, and architecture that likely would work with the U.S. Department of Transportation, sends potential victims an initial email in which they're told that the U.S. Department of Transportation is inviting them to submit a bid for a department project by clicking a big blue button with the words, "Click here to bid." The emails themselves are launched from a domain, transportation.gov.net or transportationgov.net, that was registered by Amazon on August 16th. Kay said the date of its creation, revealed by Whois, seems to signal that the site was set up specifically for the phishing campaign. To anyone familiar with government sites, the domain would appear suspicious given that government sites typically have a .gov suffix. However, to someone reading through quickly, the domain name might seem at least somewhere in the ballpark of reality. If people take the bait and click, they're led to a site, transportation.gov.bid, procure.secure.akjackpot.com, with reassuring sounding subdomains like transportation, gov, and secure. Kay wrote, however, the base domain of the site, akjackpot.com, was actually registered in 2019 and hosts what may or may not be an online casino that appears to cater to Malaysians. It then goes on, once you hit the site, it is a spoofed site of a legitimate U.S. government site, including like a warning how to detect whether or not a site is legitimate. It asks you to enter in your credentials. Once you enter in your credentials, of course, because it's a spoofed fake site, they have your credentials, and boom, you have been nailed. Right-wing sting artist James O'Keefe says hackers scammed his Project Veritas out of $165,000. Project Veritas announced on Monday that it was defrauded out of $165,000 after being targeted by hackers. James O'Keefe, the group's founder, said that scammers posing as the group's attorneys were able to convince his team to transfer funds out of their bank account. So we received an invoice for $165,000 from a few of our attorneys, and we intended to pay that invoice, so we set up wire transfers for payment, O'Keefe says. Within an hour, the lawyers reached out to us asking us to pay the invoice via a new account they had set up. O'Keefe further claims that the hackers appeared to be monitoring his correspondence with his actual attorneys before interjecting with a similar-looking email account. The hack appears to be what is known as a business email compromise or email account compromise (EAC) attack. The FBI describes such attacks as sophisticated scams targeting both businesses and individuals performing transfers of funds. We move on to the ZLoader story. A targeted campaign delivering ZLoader banking Trojan is spreading via Google AdWords and is using a mechanism to disable all Windows Defender modules on victim machines. That's according to Sentinel Labs, which said that to lower the rates of detection, the infection chain for the campaign also includes the use of a signed dropper, plus a backdoored version of the Windows utility wextract.exe to embed the ZLoader payload itself. ZLoader has been around a while, one of many malware forks rising from the ashes of the Zeus banking Trojan after its source code was published nearly 10 years ago. It is a typical banking Trojan which implements web injection to steal cookies, passwords, and any sensitive information. Sentinel Labs analyst noted in a posting on the new campaign. It attacks users of financial institutions all over the world and has also been used to deliver ransomware families like Egregor and Ryuk. It also provides backdoor capabilities and acts as a generic loader to deliver other forms of malware. To target victims, the malware is spread from a fake Google advertisement published through Google AdWords for various software, an indirect alternative to social engineering tactics like spear phishing and emails. The lures include Discord, Java plugins, Microsoft's TeamViewer, and Zoom. Thus, When someone Google say TeamViewer download, an advertisement shown by Google will redirect the person to a fake TeamViewer site under the attacker's control, according to Sentinel Labs. From there, the user can be tricked into downloading a fake installer in a signed MSI format with a signing timestamp of August 23rd. It appears that the cybercriminals managed to obtain a valid certificate issued by Fly Intellect Incorporated, a software company in Brampton, Canada. The company was registered on 29th of June 2021, suggesting that the threat actor possibly registered the company for the purpose of obtaining those certificates. We move on to patches. Apple users should immediately update all their devices, iPhones, iPads, Macs, and Apple Watches to install an emergency patch for a zero-click, zero-day exploited by NSO Group to install spyware. The security updates pushed out by Apple on Monday include iOS 14.8 for iPhones and iPads, as well as new updates for Apple Watch and macOS. The patches will fix at least one vulnerability that the tech behemoth said may have been actively exploited. Citizen Lab first discovered the never-before-seen zero-click exploit, which it detected targeting iMessaging last month. It's allegedly been used to illegally spy on Bahraini activists with NSO Group's Pegasus spyware, according to the cybersecurity watchdog. The digital researchers dubbed the new iMessaging exploit Forced Entry. Citizen Group said in August that they had identified 9 Bahraini activists whose iPhones were inflicted with Pegasus spyware between June 20th and February 2021. Some of the activists' phones suffered zero-click iMessage attacks that, besides forced entry, also included the 2020 Kismet exploit. The activists included 3 members of WAD, a secular Bahraini political society, 3 members of the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, 2 exiled Bahraini dissidents, and 1 member of Al-Wifaq, a Shiite Bahraini political society, Citizen Lab wrote. The forced entry exploit was particularly notable in that it was successfully deployed against the latest iOS versions 14.4 and 14.6, blowing past Apple's new Blast Store sandboxing feature to install spyware on the phones of the Bahraini activists. Now, if you recall, I did an episode with the news that the Blast Door had been penetrated in both 14.4 and 14.6 versions of iOS. Microsoft Patch Tuesday security updates for September 2020 addressed a high-severity zero-day RC actively exploited in targeted attacks aimed at Microsoft Office and Office 365 on Windows 10 computers. The flaw, tracked as CVE-2021-40444, resides in the MSHTML, which is the main HTML component of the Windows Internet Explorer browser. It's also used in other applications. Last week, Microsoft warned of a zero-day vulnerability in Internet Explorer that is actively exploited by threat actors to hijack vulnerable Windows systems. At the time, Microsoft did not share info about the attacks or the nature of the threat actors. The vulnerability was exploited by threat actors in mall spam attacks spreading weaponized Office documents. Google addresses a new Chrome zero-day flaw actively exploited in the wild. Google released Chrome 93.0.4577.82 for Windows, Mac, and Linux that fixed 11 security issues, including 2 zero-day vulnerabilities actively exploited in the wild. This is the 10th zero-day vulnerability in Chrome fixed by Google that was exploited in attacks in the wild. Both zero-day vulnerabilities fixed in Chrome 93.0.4577.82 were disclosed to Google on September 8, 2021. The first issue, tracked as CVE-2021-30633, is an out-of-bounds write that resides in the V8 JavaScript engine, while the CVE-2021-30633 flaw is a use-after-free vulnerability that impacts the indexed database API. The 2 zero-day flaws could be exploited to trigger a denial of service condition, and under specific circumstances, they can allow attackers to escape the sandbox, perform remote code execution, and carry out other malicious activities. The full list of bugs addressed with the latest release is CVE-2021-30625, use after free in selection API, CVE-2021-30626, out of bounds memory access in angle, CVE-2021-30627, type confusion in blink layout, CVE-2021-30628, stack buffer overflow in angle, CVE-2021-30629, use after free in permissions, CVE-2021-30630, inappropriate implementation in blink, CVE-2021-30631, type confusion in blink layout, CVE-2021-30632, out of bounds write in V8, and CVE-2021-30633, use after free in indexed DB API. We move on to attacks, vulnerabilities, and updates. On Thursday evening, KrebsOnSecurity was the subject of a rather massive and mercifully brief distributed denial of service attack. The assault came from Meris, the same new botnet behind record-shattering attacks against Russian search giant Yandex last week and internet infrastructure firm Cloudflare earlier this summer. Cloudflare recently wrote about its attack, which clocked in at 17.2 million bogus requests per second. To put that in perspective, Cloudflare serves over 25 million HTTP requests per second on average. In its August 19th write-up, Cloudflare neglected to assign a name to the botnet behind the attack, but on Thursday, distributed denial of service protection firm Crater Labs identified the culprit, Meris, a new monster that first emerged at the end of June. While the KrebsOnSecurity Meris attack was far smaller than the recent Cloudflare distributed denial of service, it was far larger than the Mirai distributed denial of service attack in 2016 that held KrebsOnSecurity offline for nearly 4 days. The traffic deluge from Thursday's attack on the site was more than 4 times what Mirai threw at the site 5 years ago. This latest attack involved more than 2 million requests per second. By comparison, the 2016 Mirai distributed denial of service generated approximately 450,000 requests per second. Last week, the Russian internet giant Yandex has been targeted by the largest distributed denial of service attack in history of Runet, the Russian internet designed to be independent of the World Wide Web and ensure the resilience of the country to an internal shutdown. The distributed denial of service attack was launched by a new distributed denial of service botnet tracked as Meris, Latvian word for plague. It peaked at the unprecedented rate of 21.8 million requests per second. According to a joint investigation conducted by Yandex and Crater Labs, the Meris botnet is composed of approximately more than 200,000 devices. According to experts, most of the devices composing the botnet are MikroTik routers running various versions of Router OS. The network equipment maker MikroTik revealed that the routers were previously compromised in 2018. The vendor explained that the devices haven't been properly secured, even if the security patches released by MikroTik at the time were installed. The company pointed out that if somebody got users' passwords in 2018, even if the routers have been patched, users are recommended to change their password, recheck their firewall settings to block untrusted remote access, and check for suspicious scripts. The vendor highlighted that the threat actors are not exploiting any undisclosed vulnerability in the devices. The company attempted to notify potentially affected users, but many of them have never been in contact with MikroTik and evidently did not properly secure their devices. The experts also recommended to disable SOCs and disable all suspicious rules. BlackMatter ransomware hits Japanese tech giant Olympus. Japanese technology giant Olympus is currently investigating a cyber incident on its EMEA IT systems that happened earlier this month that sources said is the result of a BlackMatter ransomware attack. The company detected suspicious activity on September 8th and immediately mobilized a specialized response team, including forensic experts, according to a press statement released over the weekend. As part of the investigation, we have suspended data transfers in the affected systems and have informed the relevant external partners, according to the statement. We're currently working to determine the extent of the issue and will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. Olympus, a multinational company with more than 31,600 employees worldwide, manufactures optical and digital reprography technology for the medical and life sciences industries. It was well known in the past as a pioneer in both analog and digital cameras, but sold off its struggling camera division in January. It appears Olympus was the victim of the BlackMatter ransomware group, one of the cybercriminal organizations that has risen to prominence after other purveyors of ransomware like DarkSide and Revel and Ragnarok shut down their operations, according to a report in TechCrunch. Citing a person familiar with the incident, the attack began in the early morning of September 8th, with BlackMatter claiming responsibility in a ransom note left on infected computers, according to the report. Your network is encrypted and not currently operational, the note said, according to the report. If you pay, we'll provide you with the programs for decryption. Security researchers from Cisco Talos uncovered a spear phishing campaign dubbed Operational Layover that targeted the aviation industry for 2 years without being detected. The experts believe that the threat actor behind this campaign is based out of Nigeria with a high degree of confidence and isn't technically sophisticated. The group is suspected to have been running successful malware campaigns for more than 5 years. The attackers have used off-the-shelf malware since the beginning of their operations and have never developed their own malware. Talos researchers believe that the group was able to remain under the radar using cryptors that it bought on cybercrime forums. The spear phishing messages used bait documents specifically crafted to target the aviation or cargo industry that purport to be PDF files but link to a VB script file hosted on Google Drive, which ultimately leads to the delivery of remote access Trojans like async-rat and NJRAT. Evidence collected by the experts suggests that the threat actor has been active at least since 2013. Further analysis of the operations associated with this threat actor revealed the use of different domains and rats into their campaigns, including CyberGate rat, async rat, and a batch file used to download and execute other malware. Researchers provided technical details about a recently addressed critical vulnerability dubbed Seventh Inferno in Netgear smart switches that could be exploited by an attacker to potentially execute malicious code and take control of the affected devices. The Seventh Inferno vulnerability received a CVSS score of 9.8. It was spotted with other two bugs, respectively tracked as Demon's Cries, CVSS score of 9.8, and Draconian Fear with a CVSS score of 7.8. The flaws were discovered by Google security engineer Ginval Coldwind. Netgear addressed them earlier this month. Netgear released security patches to fix them on September 3rd. Chipmaker AMD has addressed a medium severity issue in platform security processor Chipset Driver, tracked as CVE-2021-26333, that could allow an attacker to obtain sensitive information from the targeted system. The vulnerability is an information disclosure issue, and attacker can trigger it by sending requests to the driver, resulting in a potential data leak from uninitialized physical pages. The flaw was reported by Kyriakos Ekonomou from Zero Peril. Zero Peril has discovered two issues in the AMD PSP.sys kernel driver module that ships with AMD chipset drivers packaged for multiple AMD chipsets. The second issue, reported by Zero Peril, is a memory leak type bug. AMD has released PSP driver version 3.08.17.7.35 to fix both issues. The AMD chipset drivers package for the following AMD chipsets have been impacted: B350, A320, X370, X399, B450, X470, X570, B550, A520, TRX40, and WRX80. Threat actors behind the Mirai Botnet start exploiting a critical Azure OMIGOD vulnerability tracked to CVE-2021-38647 a few days after Microsoft disclosed them. Recently released September 2021 Patch Tuesday security updates have addressed 4 severe vulnerabilities collectively tracked as OMIGOD in the Open Management Infrastructure software agent that exposes Azure users to attack. Below is the list of the OMIGOD flaws. CVE-2021-38647 unauthenticated, RCE as root, severity 9.8, CVE-2021-38648 privilege escalation vulnerability, severity 7.8, CVE-2021-38645 privilege escalation vulnerability, severity 7.8, CVE-2021-38649 privilege escalation vulnerability, severity 7.0. Researchers estimate that thousands of Azure customers and millions of endpoints are potentially at risk of attack. Threat actors immediately started scanning the internet for vulnerable installs, as confirmed by independent researchers and security firms. The popular expert Kevin Beaumont reported that a Mirai Botnet is attempting to compromise vulnerable systems. It also closes port 5896, OMI SSL port, to prevent other threat actors to infect. German election body hit by a cyber attack. Threat actors last month hit the website of the authority running Germany's September 26 general election, reported AFP. According to a spokesman for the organization, the attack took place at the end of August and caused temporary disruption of the service. The website, which was used to publish the official results of the vote, was hit by a distributed denial of service attack. The attack did not impact the IT infrastructure used to manage the election due to the defense implemented by the government technicians. The Federal Prosecutor's Office launched an investigation into the incident. Government officials recently blamed Russian state-sponsored hackers of espionage or cyber espionage on MPs. Early September, Germany has formally protested to Russia over a series of cyber attacks aimed at stealing data from lawmakers that could be used to arrange disinformation campaigns before the upcoming German election. The spokeswoman for the Foreign Ministry, Andrea Sasse, said that threat actor tracked as Ghostwriter has been combining conventional cyber attacks with disinformation and influence operations in attacks against Germany. The alleged state-sponsored hackers conducted phishing attacks against federal and state lawmakers to steal their personal login details. Recently, there has been a plethora of UPX-packed crypto mining malware written in Golang targeting Linux systems and web applications popping up in the news. The malware's primary tactic is to spread by taking advantage of vulnerable systems and weak administrative credentials. Once they've been infected, these systems are then used to mine cryptocurrency. The sample was named Capoa and examined based on the code's output to terminal. Around the same time the news was spreading about these crypto mining malware attacks, SIRT honeypots were infected with PHP malware that arrived via a backdoored addition to a WordPress plugin named Download Monitor. Download Monitor had been installed after the honeypot's weak WordPress admin credentials had been guessed. A 3 megabyte UPX package Golang binary was also downloaded to /temp. Upon examination, it was clear the malware had some decryption functionality and an encrypted file stored in another directory. Crypto mining campaigns are continuing to evolve. The Capoa campaign's use of multiple vulnerabilities and tactics highlights just how intent these operators are on getting a foothold on as many machines as possible. Good news is, the same technique recommended for most organizations to keep systems and networks secure applies here. Don't use weak or default credentials for servers or deployed applications. Ensure you're keeping those deployed applications up to date with the latest security patches and check in on them from time to time. Keeping an eye out for higher than normal system resource consumption or unexpected running processes, suspicious artifacts, files, cron, tab entries, SSH keys, etc., and suspicious access log entries, etc., will help you potentially identify compromised machines. Buffins devised a transient side channel attack on modern processors, Spook.Js, that can be abused by threat actors to bypass site isolation protections implemented in Google Chrome and Chromium browsers. The technique allows, in some cases, to steal sensitive information via malicious JavaScript code. The attack was discovered by researchers from the University of Michigan, University of Adelaide, Georgia Institute of Technology, and Tel Aviv University. Both attacks leverage the speculative execution technique but used by most modern CPUs to optimize performance. Google implemented this site isolation to mitigate Spectre-like attacks. Anyway, it is important to understand that the feature can only attempt to limit information leakage by separating the contents of different websites into different processes. The feature was enabled in Chrome 67 and above, allowing to load each website in its own process. The researcher discovered some cases where the site isolation fails in separating two websites, opening the doors to Spectre attacks. Security researchers from Lumen's Black Lotus Labs have discovered several malicious Linux binaries developed to target the Windows Subsystem for Linux. Windows Subsystem for Linux, otherwise known as WSL, is a compatible layer for running Linux binary executables in ELF format, natively on Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows Server 2019. The discovery of the malicious Linux binary suggests that threat actors are devising new methods to target Windows systems and evade the detection. The files identified by the expert were written primarily in Python 3 and compiled in the Linux binary format, ELF, or executable and linkable format, for the Debian operating system. The Black Lotus Labs detected multiple samples that were uploaded every 2 to 3 weeks from as early as May 3, 2021 through August 22, 2021. The malicious code acted as a loader, retrieved a remote file, and then injected it into a running process leveraging Windows API calls. Experts pointed out that the files had a very low detection rate on the virus total because most Windows antivirus solutions don't have signatures to detect ELF files. The loader analyzed by the experts used standard Python libraries to make the malicious files multi-platform. One of the samples was printing the words I can't read it in Russian, but it translates to "Hello, Sanya," which suggests that the author has some familiarity with the language, and that was making some tests. All of the malicious files analyzed by the experts contained private or non-routable IP addresses, except for one that contained the 185.63.90.137 IP address. The FBI, CISA, and U.S. Coast Guard CyberGuard, also known as CG Cyber, warned today that state-backed advanced persistent threat actors are likely among those who've been actively exploiting a newly identified bug in Zoho's single sign-on and password management tool since early last month. At issue is a critical authentication bypass vulnerability in Zoho Manage Engine Add Self-Service Plus platform that can lead to remote code execution and thus open the corporate doors to attackers who can run amok with free reign access across users' Active Directory and cloud accounts. The Zoho Manage Engine at Self-Service Plus is a self-service password management and single sign-on platform for Active Directory and cloud apps, meaning that any cyber attacker able to take control of the platform would have multiple pivot points into both mission-critical apps and those critical app-sensitive data, as well as other parts of the corporate network via Active Directory. It is, in other words, a powerful, highly privileged application which can act as a convenient point of entry to areas deep inside the enterprise's footprint for both users and attackers alike. Successful attacks have been uploading a .zip file containing a Java server web shell pretending to be an X509 certificate, service.cer. Next, after that, come requests to different API endpoints to further exploit the targeted system. The next step in the exploit is lateral movement using Windows management instrumentation, gaining access to a domain controller, dumping of ntds.dit and security/system registry hives, and then from there, further compromised access. Confirming a successful compromise of Manage Engine at Self-Service Plus may be difficult, given that the attackers are running cleanup scripts designed to rub out their tracks by removing traces of initial point of compromise, and by observing any relationship between the exploitation of the CVE-2021-40539 and the web shell. Microsoft warns of attacks exploiting recently patched Windows MSHTML CVE-2021-40444 bug. Microsoft warned of multiple threat actors, including ransomware operators, that are exploiting the recently patched Windows MSHTML remote code execution security flaw with the CVE-2021-40444 in attacks against organizations. The IT giant, why do we still say that? Everybody knows Microsoft. The IT giant says that threat actors started targeting this issue on August 18th, before Microsoft shared mitigation for this vulnerability. Threat actors used weaponized Office documents. The campaigns observed in August 2021 likely employed emails impersonating contracts and legal agreements. The messages used documents that were hosted on file-sharing sites. Experts noticed that loaders employed in the attacks connected with the command control server infrastructure connected with several cybercrime campaigns, including ransomware operators. MSTIC researchers track a large cluster of malicious activity involving Cobalt Strike infrastructure under the name Dev0365, which has many similarities with another Cobalt Strike infrastructure that suggests it was managed by a third-party threat actor. Over 60 million wearable fitness tracking records exposed via unsecured databases. An unsecured database containing over 61 million records related to wearable technology and fitness services was left exposed online. On Monday, website Planet, together with cybersecurity researcher Jeremiah Fowler, said the databases belong to Get Health. Based in New York, Get Health describes itself as a unified solution to access health and wellness data from hundreds of wearables, medical devices, and apps. The firm's platform is able to pull health-related data from sources including Fitbit, Misfit Wearables, Microsoft Band, Strava, and Google Fit. On June 30th, 2021, the team discovered a database online that was not password protected. The researchers said that over 61 million records were contained in the data repository, including vast swaths of user information, some of which could be considered sensitive, such as their names, dates of birth, weight, height, gender, and GPS logs, among other datasets. While sampling a set of approximately 20,000 records to verify the data, the team found that the majority of data sources were from Fitbit and Apple's HealthKit. This information was in plain text. While there was an ID that appeared to be encrypted, the researchers said the geolocation was structured as in America, New York, Europe, Dublin, and revealed that users were located all over the world. The files also showed where data is stored and a blueprint of how the network operates from the back end and was configured, the team added. Vermilion Strike, a Linux implementation of Cobalt Strike Beacon used in attacks. Threat actors re-implemented from scratch of unofficial Linux and Windows versions of Cobalt Strike Beacon and are actively using them in attacks aimed at organizations worldwide. The Linux versions of the commercial post-exploitation tool was codenamed Vermilion Strike, and according to Integer researchers that spotted it, it's fully undetected by vendors. Integer researchers reported that the Linux variant has been active in the wild since August. Threat actors used it in attacks against telecom companies, government agencies, IT companies, financial institutions, and advisory companies. The sample analyzed by the researchers was uploaded to VirusTotal from Malaysia and has a zero-rate detection in the platform at the time of this writing. Researchers believe that Vermilion Strike was used in highly targeted attacks. The new Maxtrilla Trojan is being disseminated and targeting several banks. The new Maxtrilla Trojan is being disseminated and targeting several banks around the world. The recent campaign has been disseminated in Latin America, but also extended to Europe and Portugal. The campaign has been leveraged by Brazilian criminals gangue, who use customized phishing templates to spread the Trojan Maxtrilla according to the target country. The malware samples disseminated in Portugal open a legitimate webpage from Autoridade Tributária e Aduaneira Finanças to lure the victims during the execution of the first stage. After that, the malware creates persistence, disables Internet Explorer security settings to facilitate the download of the second stage from the Internet. In short, the second stage, Maxtrilla Trojan, checks or creates persistence when executed on the target machine, uses a mechanism of capturing details from opened foreground windows matching its name with specific hard-coded strings relating to banking companies, launches banking Windows overlay, can deploy new payloads, and communicates with the command control server in real time. WooCommerce multi-currency bug allows shoppers to change e-commerce pricing. A security vulnerability in the WooCommerce multi-currency plugin could allow any customer to change the pricing for products in online stores. WooCommerce is a popular e-commerce plugin for WordPress-powered websites. The multi-currency plugin from Envato, meanwhile, allows e-tailers using WooCommerce to set pricing for international shoppers. The plugin automatically detects the customer's geolocation and displays pricing in the customer country's currency, with the exchange rate set manually or automatically using current exchange rates. It has 7,700 sales on Envato Marketplace. According to the Ninja Technologies Network, the issue is a broken access control vulnerability in version 2.1.17 and below, impacting multi-currency's import fixed price feature, which allows e-commerce sites to set custom prices, thus overriding any prices calculated automatically by exchange rate. The import function, import_CSV, is loaded by the WMC bulk fixed price AJAX hook in the WooCommerce multi-currency includes import CSV script. The function lacks a capability check and a security nonce, and therefore is accessible to all authenticated users, which includes WooCommerce customers. To exploit the problem, cyber attackers could upload a specially crafted CSV file to the site, which uses a product's current currency and the product ID. This allows them to change the price of one or multiple products, researchers explain. The vulnerability is particularly damaging for online shops selling digital goods because the attacker will have time to download the goods, they said. It is important to verify every order because the hack doesn't change the product's price in the backend, hence the shop manager may unlikely notice it immediately. Good news for the victims of Revil ransomware gangs that were infected before the operations were temporarily halted on July 13th. Bitdefender released a free master decryptor that allows them to recover their files for free. On July 2nd, the Revil gang hit the Kaseya cloud-based MSP platform, impacting MSPs and their customers. The Revil ransomware operations initially compromised the Kaseya VSA's infrastructure, then pushed out malicious updates to VSA on-premise servers to deploy ransomware on enterprise networks. The group asked for $70 million worth of Bitcoin for decrypting all systems impacted in the Kaseya supply chain ransomware attack. Starting from July 13th, the infrastructure and the websites used by the Revil ransomware gang were mysteriously unreachable. The Tor leak site, the payment website, Decoder.re, and their backend infrastructure went offline simultaneously. Bitdefender developed a decryptor with the help of a law enforcement partner that provided the company decryption keys. On September 7th, the servers of the Revil ransomware gang were back online after about 2 months since their shutdown. The circumstance was immediately noted by many researchers, including myself. The dark web leak site of the ransomware gang, also known as the Happy Blog, is back online, and the Decoder.ere is also back online. Now, you can be sure that Revil is an imminent threat, so be vigilant, patch often, and keep on your toes. The development team behind a popular NPM package called Pac-Resolver for the JavaScript programming language fixed a high-severity remote code execution vulnerability tracked as CVE-2021-26406. The vulnerability can be exploited by remote attackers to run malicious code inside Node.js applications. The flaw affects Pac-Resolver versions before 5.0.0. It received a CVSS score of 8.1. A proxy auto-config file defines how web browsers and other user agents can automatically choose the appropriate proxy server for fetching a given URL. The pack file is a script written in JavaScript that instructs an HTTP client about the proxy to use for a given host name, using dynamic logic to do so. Now, Pac-Resolver has 3,230,009 weekly downloads, so watch out, guys. Anonymous leaks gigabytes of data from alt-right web host Epic. Hacktivist Collective Anonymous claims to have obtained gigabytes of data from Epic, which provides domain name, hosting, and DNS services for a variety of clients. These include Texas GOP, Gab, Parler, and 8chan, among other right-wing sites. The stolen data has been released as a torrent. The Hacktivist Collective says that the data set, which is over 180 gigabytes in size, contains a decade's worth of data from the company. Anonymous says the data set is all that's needed to trace actual ownership and management of the fascist side of the internet that has eluded researchers, activists, and, well, just about everybody. If this information is correct, Epic's customers' data and identities could now fall into the hands of activists, researchers, and just about anyone curious enough to take a peek. Epic is a domain registrar and web services provider known to serve right-wing clients, some of which have been turned down by more mainstream IT providers due to the objectionable and sometimes illicit content hosted by the clients. Anonymous activists began with what the group calls Operation Jane after the Texas Heartbeat Act was signed into law this month. The restrictive abortion law allows private individuals, not necessarily government bodies or police, to enforce the 6-week abortion ban. According to the act, any Texas resident can bring a civil lawsuit against any person who performs or helps to facilitate an illegal abortion and claim at least $10,000 in damages. Among the data set are various SQL databases containing what appear to be customer records associated with every domain name hosted by Epic. Ours analyzed a small subset of the leaked data set, including what a source calls an Epic employee's mailbox, which contains correspondence from Epic CEO Rob Monster. Members of the whistleblower site Distributed Denial of Secrets have also made the data set available via alternate means for those unable to use torrents. Supply chain cyber attackers have disrupted everyday life and dominated headlines this year. One of the biggest challenges in preventing them is that our digital supply chain is not transparent. If you don't know what's hidden in the services and products you use every day, how can you manage the risk? Wiz's research team recently discovered a series of alarming vulnerabilities that highlight the supply chain risk of open source code, particularly for customers of cloud computing services. The source of the problem is a ubiquitous but little-known software agent called Open Management Infrastructure that's embedded in many popular Azure services. When customers set up a Linux virtual machine in their cloud, the OMI agent is automatically deployed without their knowledge when they enable certain Azure services. Unless a patch is applied, attackers can easily exploit these 4 vulnerabilities to escalate to root privileges and remotely execute malicious code, for instance, encrypting files for ransom. Wiz named this quartet of 0 days, "Oh my god!" because that was their reaction when they discovered them. They conservatively estimate that thousands of Azure customers and millions of endpoints are affected. In a small sample of Azure tenants they analyzed, over 65% were unknowingly at risk. Last week, Microsoft issued the following CVEs for OMIGOD and made a patch available to customers during their Patch Tuesday release. CVE 2021-38647, unauthenticated RCE as root with a severity score of 9.8. CVE 2021-38648, privilege escalation vulnerability with severity score of 7.8. CVE 2021-38645, privilege escalation vulnerabilities with a severity score of 7.8. CVE 2021-38649, privilege escalation vulnerability with severity score of 7.0. All Azure users are urged to read and incorporate the mitigation steps. Millions of devices running the HP Omen gaming hub were using a driver with a bug that could give attackers kernel mode access without administrative privileges. HP has since released a patch, but a new report on the flaw, CVE 2021-3437, from researchers from Sentinel Labs details how the gaming software was built in part by copying code from a problematic open source driver called WingRing0.sys. HP Omen Gaming Hub is software that comes pre-installed on the HP Omen desktops and laptops and functions as an optimizer for playing games, making automatic adjustments to fan speeds, lighting, and accessory controls for the best gaming experience. Vulnerable HP Omen versions are HP Omen Gaming Hub prior to version 11.6.3.0, HP Omen Gaming Hub SDK package prior to version 1.0.44. Metadata showed the researchers the HP Omen Gaming Hub reused code for its driver that is vulnerable to unauthorized privilege escalation. Unfortunately, issues with the WinRing0.sys driver are well known, the Sentinel Labs report said. This driver enables user mode applications to perform various privileged kernel mode operations via input-out controls. The HP driver potentially offers access through IOCTLs using model-specific registers to access or alter CPU data, researchers added. This high-severity flaw, if exploited, could allow any user on the computer, even without privileges, to escalate privileges to and run code in kernel mode. The report added, among the obvious abuses of such vulnerabilities are that they could be used to bypass security products. We move on to other security news. Microsoft will allow its users to log into their consumer accounts without using passwords. They will be able to use Microsoft's Authenticator app, Windows Hello, physical security keys, or phone email verification codes. The passwordless login support will be rolled out over the coming weeks, the IT giant announced. It'll allow to increase the security of the customer's account, protecting them from different attacks, such as phishing and brute force attacks. In order to use the passwordless authentication process, users will have to access the Advanced Security Options menu in their account and select Passwordless Account after having chosen an alternative authentication method. Microsoft says the feature will be rolled out over the coming weeks. It already provides passwordless methods to enterprise users since March 2021 and plans to roll it out for Azure Active Directory accounts. NBC News collected and analyzed school files from dark web pages and found they're littered with personal information of children. The ongoing wave of ransomware attacks has cost companies and institutions billions of dollars and exposed personal information about everyone from hospital patients to police officers. It's also swept up school districts, meaning files from thousands of schools are currently visible on those hackers' sites. Some schools contacted about the leaks appeared unaware of the problem, and even after schools are able to resume operations following an attack, parents have little recourse when their children's information is leaked. Some of the data is personal, like medical conditions or family financial statuses. Other pieces of data, such as social security numbers or birthdays, are permanent indicators of who they are, and their theft can set up a child for a lifetime of potential identity theft. The Biden administration is putting in place all the strategies to disrupt the operations of the ransomware gangs, and according to the Wall Street Journal, it is now planning to target the digital finance infrastructure used by these criminal organizations. The Biden administration is expected to apply sanctions against crypto exchanges, wallets, and traders used by the gangs to cash out their ransom payments. The Biden administration is preparing an array of actions, including sanctions, to make it harder for hackers to use digital currency to profit from ransomware attacks, according to the people familiar with the matter, states the Wall Street Journal. The government hopes to choke off access to a form of payment that has supported a booming criminal industry and a rising national security threat. Over the past years, the number of ransomware attacks has exponentially increased, causing huge losses to the victims and disrupting their activities. The operations also targeted the U.S. critical infrastructure. The attack against, for example, Colonial Pipeline demonstrates the potential damages that such kinds of criminal practice could cause to the U.S. citizens. The U.S. authorities want to target the economy behind the ransomware operations, disrupting the process used by the gang to convert their ransom payments to fiat currency. Every time victims pay ransomware, the cryptocurrencies are transferred to wallets used by the ransomware gangs. Then the groups attempt to launder the money by using so-called mixer services. The final step consists of converting the crypto funds through exchanges. The authorities want to put pressure on the exchanges that are critical components for ransomware operations and threaten to apply sanctions for their support to the criminal practice. The Open Web App Security Project, or OWASP, has released its top 10 list of vulnerabilities in web software as part of the general movement to make software less painfully insecure at the design stage. Among new entries in the top 10 flaws highlighted by the project are insecure design relating to specific design flaws and software and data integrity failures. The latter refers to making assumptions related to software updates, critical data, and CI/CD pipelines without verifying integrity. The release is a draft for public comment and peer review, with the final version to be released later this year. This year's current number one web app security flaw is broken access control, with OWASP glumly noting the 34CW's map to broken access control had more occurrences in applications than any other category. I highly suggest you check out my episode on the full list, or if you want to, you can read about it on OWASP's website. The link to the episode is above and it'll be pinned in the comment section below. 3 former NSA employees fined for providing hacker-for-hire services to UAE firm. 3 former NSA employees, Mark Bayer, 49, Ryan Adams, 34, and Daniel Garrick, 40, entered into a deferred prosecution agreement that restricts their future activities and employment. The trio has worked as hackers for hire for the United Arab Emirates cybersecurity company BlackMatter between January 2016 and November 2019. The three suspects worked at the UAE company and developed at least two iOS zero-click exploits dubbed Karma and Karma 2. In 2019, the Reuters agencies published a report that detailed the activity of a secret hacking team of American mercenaries that joined the Project Raven as part of a clandestine team of experts that helped the United Arab Emirates in conducting a surveillance program and conducting hit-and-run hacking operations. U.S. officials said that the three hackers ignored warnings and supported a foreign government in developing offensive cyber operations. This is not acceptable. Facebook will continue to work to protect the privacy of WhatsApp users and announced that it will allow users to encrypt their message history backups in the cloud. While WhatsApp has already implemented end-to-end encryption since 2016, the company still stores backups in the cloud unencrypted. The recently announced feature will ensure that only account owners will have access to the content of the backups. WhatsApp will use a unique, randomly generated encryption key to encrypt the backup. The user can choose to secure the key manually or with a user password. When users want to access their backup, they can use their encryption key or they can use their personal password to retrieve their encryption key from the HSM-based backup key vault and decrypt the backup. Google implements new private compute services for Android. Good news for Android users, Google has implemented the private compute services, a set of features aimed at improving their privacy. The new features have been added to the Private Compute Core in Android 12 Beta, an open-source, secure environment private by design, which allows keeping user personal information safe, private, and local to the phone. According to Google, the new features in Android 12 give the users more transparency around which apps are accessing the data and more controls so they can make informed choices about how much private information your apps can access. The company implemented the following features. Live Caption, which adds captions to any media using Google's on-device speech recognition. Now Playing, which recognizes music playing nearby and displays the song title and artist name on your device's lock screen. Smart Reply, which suggests relevant responses based on the conversation you're having in messaging apps. With that, I say thanks again for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.